Joking.
What did you say to me?
Peter, what are you doing?
Get off my plane!
That's not even the same. Oh! What the hell? Oh!
Hey, how's it going YouTube? This is Devin with Pubstomp MTG, and in today's video, I wanted to talk about 5 commanders that absolutely pubstomp tables. And this is kind of fitting because my name is, after all, Pubstomp MTG. It's also kind of funny because the reason why I named myself Pubstomp MTG was actually because my original logo, I made a T-Rex basically stomping on MTG, and so I thought, okay, Pubstomp works. I didn't really think of it too much, but here it is. And there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to make this kind of video specifically. For one, I want people to be informed of some commanders that you may want to shy away with if you're going more for a casual game, or if you are playing a casual game, you should make sure to stay alert when somebody's playing one of these commanders. And just to specify in this video, I am talking about a casual setting of commander. I'm not in any way talking about CDH because that's definitely a different territory. I wanted to focus on casual on this aspect. So let's first start out with Korvold Fakehurst King. Everybody knows this one. Everybody knows that you can't really make a casual Korvold deck. Even if you try, it's still going to be very busted. If I were to depower this commander in any sort of way, I would actually just say if you sacrifice a creature, you may draw a card, and that would still be pretty powerful. But just the fact that whenever you sacrifice any permanent, you're going to be drawing a card. So this will work off of fetch lands, this will work off of treasure tokens, any kind of permanent on the battlefield that you're sacrificing, you're going to get that value of drawing cards with Korvold. Also on top of that, Korvold will get bigger and bigger, getting +1/+1 counters whenever you are sacrificing. So this works as a great Voltron commander, especially with that flying ability. So if you haven't closed out the game already with the insane amount of card advantage, most likely you are going to be winning by Voltron. So this just rewards you by sacrificing, which you probably want to be already doing in a sacrifice build anyways. Especially when you combine it with a lot of Blood Artist effects, this commander really gets it going and can really pub stomp the table. Let's move on to the next commander, and that's Voja, Jaws of the Conclave. This actually came out this year, which is kind of surprising. This feels like it came out a couple years ago, but nope, it came out of Murders at Karlov Manor. This is a Naya-based commander for 5 mana. It does have Vigilance, Trample, and Ward 3, which is a lot of stats, all for 5 mana, but it does have an extra ability that just sets it over the top. Whenever it does attack, you put X/1/1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control, and you draw a card for each wolf you control. So pretty much there's this thing with a lot of legendary creatures in the past couple years where Wizards decided, hey, let's just slap a ward cost on them so that their commander's a little protected. And they kept doing it and kept doing it, and then basically every commander has some type of ward or hexproof ability. But now I'm like, stop it with the ward abilities. These are too busted. And I know 3 mana extra is not too bad with Voja, but just the fact that you have to pay extra on this is just ridiculous because it's way too powerful for its own good. Just like Korvold, it's not hard to make a very powerful deck with Voja specifically, especially because a lot of elves are basically mana dorks. You ramp out Voja very early on, and when you do swing with Voja, all of them get buffed up by a certain amount with the number of elves you do have on the battlefield. That does include Voja too. So if you have 5 elves on the battlefield, they each get 5/1/1 counters on them, including Voja, which is kind of ridiculous and honestly way too powerful for its own good. There is only one saving grace for this card, is the fact whenever Voja, Jaws of the Conclave attacks, that wording right there makes it so that you have to attack with Voja to get these abilities online, because a lot of commanders nowadays have whenever you do attack, so that's any kind of creature attacking, not even your own commander has to attack, you'll get that attack trigger. But with Voja, it specifically has to go into combat. Not that it really matters anyways, because when you have a lot of elves on the battlefield, Voja is going to swing in. It does have Vigilance, so it doesn't even tap, so it could sit back, block another big creature, because it's probably going to have like 21 counters on it with all the elves you do have on the battlefield. So I could go on and on about this commander, but it is one way too powerful commander for its own good, and I felt like it should have been a little bit more tame in my opinion. The next commander I wanted to focus on is Tox World the Corrosive. This is absolutely disgusting, not just the art alone, because honestly I would never want to see that in my life, but just the fact that it has so much abilities. The only saving grace for this card is the mana cost of 7, and you're really not in the best ramp colors with a Jetmir package. So what makes this commander so mean? Well, at the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them, and whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. You can also pay a blue and a black, sacrifice a slug, and draw a card, and it's a 7/7, so there's a lot of things going on here. It's essentially a constant board wipe. Slowly, little by little, your opponent's creatures will get slime counters on them, eventually dying, and then you get to put a slug token on your side of the battlefield, and then you can sacrifice it to draw a card, so it has card advantage. It's basically a control engine engine on the battlefield, constantly making sure you're the only creature on the battlefield, all the while overwhelming your opponents, making a bunch of slugs on the battlefield. Every time I see this on the table, just the clock ticks further and further away for everyone else to die in a slow, painful death, because all the creatures on the battlefield will basically get board wiped eventually. And it is -1/-1, so it does get around certain things like indestructible, or even ward or hexproof. So I guess this commander could be a good counter against Voja, Jaws of the Conclave, because it's constantly making those creatures less powerful, all the while making you a slug army. So I guess if you want to Pubstomp the Pubstomper, there you go. Another commander I do have personal experience with, because I actually played it myself, is Koma the Cosmo Serpent. I actually love this commander so much because I love Norse mythology. This is a commander that is really hard not to Pubstomp because it's very easy to do so. I try to make it as a casual commander, but honestly every game I went into it, it just felt like I turned into the arch enemy, because everybody knew, well, Koma is going to take control of the game with all this Koma coils, tapping down creatures, and also making itself indestructible. So it's basically immune to board wipes or removal, unless they're exile based. And I think the worst part is the fact that this spell can't be countered, so good luck blue players trying to counter this one. You know this is a very powerful commander when people try to build a clone strategy around it, because obviously the more clones you do have Koma on the battlefield, the more you're going to take over the game that way. And honestly, that's how I kind of built the deck, by the way. Unlike Tox World, this does have green mana in its mana cost, so it's very easy to ramp into too. So this gets earlier on the battlefield compared to Tox World. Sometimes this just invalidates the whole argument of just play more removal, because you can't really do that half the time with Koma unless you do have exile based removal. The same can be said for Voja with that ward ability, and that's what makes these commanders very hard to play against, and typically they will Pubstomp tables that way. But let's move on to another one with Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. I'm going to go on record, and a lot of people might not agree with me, but this is a way better game ender than Craterhoof Behemoth. Judge me all you want, but this is absolutely insane. Mainly because it's only 4 mana, and Craterhoof is 8 mana, and this also can be in the command zone. Craterhoof you do have to find in your library. You have access to this at all times, and the more creatures you do have on the battlefield, the more they're going to get buffed. For example, that first mode, creatures you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance as long as you have 3 or more creatures. Then that second mode, creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample as long as you control 6 or more creatures. And with that last mode, creatures you control get +1/+0 and have double strike as long as you control 9 or more creatures. So basically, if you fulfill that requirement of having 9 or more creatures, all your creatures will get +3/+0, vigilance, trample, and double strike. You do have to have a developed board in order to have Jetmir online with those abilities, and that's not really hard to do. Jetmir does count as one of those creatures on the board. So really all you need is 2 creatures, 5 creatures, and 8 creatures. And remember, this commander is only for 4 mana too, with a 5/4 body. This commander is in the right colors of Selesnya colors with green and white, where you can play a lot of token doublers like Annoyed Procession and Parallel Lives. And if you do go with that game plan of playing a lot of creatures, which is very easy to do, if you just spat out a bunch of tokens, you're basically going to be Craterhoofing the game anyways. So seriously, this commander is pretty ridiculous. It's over the top, and I'm glad it doesn't have a ward ability, or it'd be much more busted. But luckily it's a little bit more tame, but not by much. So those are some of the commanders I wanted to talk about that basically Pubstomp at casual tables. To me personally, I feel like no matter how many times you try to make these commanders into a janky casual deck, they end up being overpowered and usually will Pubstomp at casual tables. I do know there's a lot of other commanders that can Pubstomp at the casual table. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts, and what other commanders did I miss? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stomping by.